Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Daniel Roman here for winteriscoming.net, and I am psyched because we have a special video for you guys today. I'm so excited to be here with Fonda Lee, the award-winning New York Times best-selling author of a number of excellent books, including the Green Bone Saga, the novella Untethered Sky, and several YA novels, including Zero Boxer, the Exo-duology, and the Breathmark duology, co-written with Shannon Lee. And Fonda's latest book, The Last Contract of Isako, is out on May 5th, which, as you're watching this, probably has already happened. So the book is out. Go check it out. Fonda, how are you? Thank you so much for being here.
I'm doing well. I'm delighted to be here.
So The Last Contract of Isako, I have read this book. I really enjoyed it. So I'm so excited to pick your brain about it. Um, for people who maybe know you for the Green Bone Saga, which I think is probably, obviously your most well-known work. How would you pitch this book to them if that's all they know of your stuff?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that it definitely goes in a different direction than Green Bone Saga. So for those of you who are familiar with your work, this will be a change of pace. And for those of you who aren't, it'll be a entry that you can enjoy on its own. It's a standalone science fiction novel. I have been describing it as my cyberpunk samurai epic with little splashes of Kurosawa, Dune, and John Wick.
Oh
And
man.
and it's featuring a middle-aged swordswoman who is on her final job.
Yeah, so that's a really cool description. That definitely hits a whole bunch of sweet notes there. So I do want to talk to you about like the journey for you from getting from Greenbone to this book, but since you brought up the cyberpunk elements of this, I did want to ask like, so this book is set on an alien world. It's not set on Earth. So I feel like a lot of cyberpunk dystopian novels are set on Earth.
Mhm.
How did you arrive at the point of setting this on a different planet? Was there ever a point where you considered Earth as a setting?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. One of the things that I wanted to do with this story was kind of really lean into the thematic elements of cyberpunk that I saw overlapping with the genre of samurai fiction and Chambara film. And what really kind of epitomizes cyberpunk, it is a combination of things. That idea of a high tech, low life story, right? Where like
Yeah.
essentially we have this advanced technology, but there are these layers of greed and corruption. And oftentimes the protagonists in these stories are outcasts who are kind of like lone wolves in this against the system. And what kind of epitomizes a lot of popular samurai fiction overlaps with this because oftentimes we do have that Ronin, who
Yeah.
has been betrayed by their lord or is fighting injustice in this in a feudal society, which is very strictly structured. And so that's that. I saw these common threads across those two genres. And even the fact that like the term Ronin shows up in cyberpunk in a number of contexts.
Yeah.
And actually in Japanese, the term Ronin is sometimes used to describe like a salaryman, right, who's like lost his job and is like on,
Oh man.
no longer employed. So there's kind of like these little connecting bits of tissue that I wanted to play with. But so much of cyberpunk as a genre gets associated with the aesthetic of cyberpunk. So the neon lights, the rain splattered streets and the flying cars, and like we immediately think Blade Runner. And although that aesthetic lends itself so well to that high tech, low life idea and setting, I wanted to kind of take those thematic elements and transplant them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the idea of having a story that leans into cyberpunk-esque themes, especially those of transhumanism and the wealthy having access to things that the rest of the people don't, and cyborgs or like uploading consciousness, all of those themes can be placed in a different setting. And I liked the idea of placing it in an isolated company town, essentially, because with the
Yeah.
recent um, you know, push for space exploration, but also the involvement of private enterprise and Elon Musk and his dick rockets and all of that, I went down the direction of, okay, let's say we do reach the stars, we colonize a planet, and then we have this colony that is entirely dependent on the corporation that founded the colony. And what happens when that company loses funding or something happens to it and gets spun off, or who knows what things happen in corporate life, and it loses contact the with the mother planet. Um, and I ended up going down this research rat hole of um, learning about company towns and the history of them and the nature of them often being founded with somewhat utopic principles in mind. Everything from like Lowell, Massachusetts to like mining and towns in the Appalachians to like suburbs that are developed by Disney and Google for their employees. And so
Yeah.
so all of these company towns, there's sort of a sometimes a utopic element that's very paternalistic. But
Interesting.
all and oftentimes though they lean very exploitative, where the only way that you can buy things in the company town or through the company store, you have currency that is like script. That's the only way
Sure.
that you can buy stuff. So this is all a roundabout way of saying I often find my way into a story by kind of pattern recognition across different things in genre and history and film, and being like, okay, how can I play with this? Like, how can I take these different things that are interesting to me and put them in some blender or put them in a new context? And that's how I ended up with a cyberpunk swordswoman on a colony planet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really cool melding of different elements that I hadn't seen before because, like you said, like there are things that come immediately to mind for cyberpunk. Like even like the idea of like a corporate samurai. Like immediately it's like, okay, we're in cyberpunk land. I didn't expect the alien planet here. It but obviously that makes sense. Like the corporate town, stuff like that. You worked in the corporate world for a while, right? Were there any specific ways that you were able to bring your own experiences to bear here or that were cathartic? I know when I read the beginning of this book, no big spoilers, but it has to do with layoffs. I was like, oh my God, what am I reading? So what was your personal experiences that you brought to this, if any?
Yeah, definitely a lot. So I spent years in management consulting and then corporate strategy. And so the character of Isako came to me with relatively little prompting. So oftentimes authors, we write stories, we write characters to kind of work through our own issues. Sort of a cheaper, well, it's not cheaper, but it's a form of therapy for us. And so there was a part of me that kind of wanted to play with this idea, this sort of personal imagining of like, what if I had stayed that path? What if I had
Mm,
not just decided to follow my dreams and write science fiction and fantasy novels? And I used to fly all over the place and work 70 hours a week in client service. And with the expense account and the airline status and the C-suite and all the perks that came with that. Um, and at the end of the day, what I was doing was I was, putting my labor and my ability towards helping big companies get richer. That's what I was doing. And
yeah.
it was challenging. Sometimes it was miserable. Sometimes it was fantastic. Um, and it's a whole. There is a part of me that was like, okay, what if that? What would I be like at my age now?
Yeah.
Isako's, slightly
With a
older than
bad
me, but
knee.
right. But what would that be? And so I I kind of envisioned Isako as like, a bit of a stand-in for an alternate version of myself who just leaned in, and like, and I remember going, and I did an MBA, so I remember, those exhortations, especially for women who were trying to climb the corporate ladder, to like to lean in, to really like chase, the getting to high levels in the corporate world. Um, and then also a lot of Isako's, issues come down to what does she feel like is her remaining path, her legacy now that she's at the end of her career.
Yeah.
Um, so that also, is a little bit of kind of personal catharsis for me as well, getting older and being like, oh gosh, like I've been training in martial arts for a long time. And like, yeah, my knees hurt now,
Yeah.
things, things, things of that nature also come in. So there's a lot of personal, there are a lot of personal elements to that character, and to kind of the sort of toxic productivity culture as
Uh,
well.
yeah, yeah. Um, so it's interesting, obviously, hearing you talk about getting older and thinking of legacy and things like this. Your last, I want to say, like very large book, like literal lengthwise, was Jade Legacy, the
Mhm.
last book of the Green Bone Saga, which we were talking about before we started this interview, was somehow like almost 5 years ago that book came out.
I know, hard to
Um,
believe.
yeah, so I definitely feel the getting older a little bit because I had some shock when I realized that this week prepping for this. So you did obviously the Greenbone Saga was a very detailed, in-depth, ambitious series. And it felt like you kind of took some time after to do a few smaller works. And
Mhm.
like correct me if I'm wrong on that, but like, Untethered Sky, which is a fantastic novella. There's some Greenbone short fiction that's out there, like Jade Shards that people can find now, and then Breathmarked, which is a YA duology, which the second book comes out later this year. Um, Isako feels like your next more, I don't want to say more substantial because that's not giving the right amount of credit to your other works that you've done since, which are all excellent, but like more ambitious lengthwise, we can say, and
Yeah,
a depth of world. Um so can you walk me through like how did you land on this as a science fiction cyberpunk book, getting as
right.
far away from like crime family urban fantasy? Walk me through that journey. Like, how did you arrive here at this book for your next large standalone book?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my career has been like doing what seems cool to me at the time.
That's a good way to do it.
And often it's just like, well, what's calling to me right now? So after the Green Bone Saga, I was like, I want to write short stuff. That
Yeah,
was that was a lot of large doorstopper novels.
totally.
And so I ended up doing novellas, short fiction, young adult fiction, which is very fast paced. And then, of course, the opportunity came up to work with Shannon on the Breathmark duology, and I had not done young adult for a while. I said, "Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
fun. It sounds fresh and fast paced." So I went down that path. And Isako was really because it came about really because I was a bit torn. I'm
Mm,
known for the Green Bone Saga, and so there was a part of me that was like, I want to do another fantasy series. Like
yeah.
I love fantasy series, but I also really love science fiction, and that's how I started my career. I had young adult science fiction novels, which were kind of in that gray zone between young adult and adult. And um, I had this chat with my editor, having this like kind of, oh, which direction should I go? And she said, well, if you want to do both, uh, now would be time to do the science fiction story, so that
Mm,
you don't get too down the path of like doing, because I do have another fantasy series in me that I want to
cool.
tackle, but it was like, okay, what's kind of the right order to do these? And the science fiction story had been sitting with me for years. And kind of, it was like it was its time. So that's
Yeah.
and I very much wanted to do an adult science fiction novel because I've written uh, adult fantasy, I've written young adult science fiction, I've written young adult fantasy, I've written novellas, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, a nice chonky, really substantial adult science fiction novel is like calling to me. So that's how
Cool.
we went down that path.
Cool. Yeah, and this is definitely like an adult book for people watching. Like, it's got like mystery, the corporate espionage. Like, it's a very intelligent, mind-bending book with lots of twists and
Thank you.
turns. So moving from, I mean, it makes sense to, not get boxed in like just as a fantasy author to branch out here. Um, were there any particular elements of this as a sci-fi novel that you were especially excited to be able to play
Yeah.
with this book, getting away from fantasy for a minute?
Yeah. For sure. I've always loved world building, and
Yeah.
that's, a thing that's very common across both my fantasy fiction, my science fiction building is I love the like little tangible details of world building. And with a science fiction novel, I although the process of world building is very similar, the things that like appeal to me about world building in a science fiction novel are like getting to play with the ramifications of technology, and especially playing with tropes like the cyborg body, or like uploading
Yeah.
your consciousness, and altered carbon and neuromancer and all of those, right? Because we those are such common, well-worn staples of the genre. So I
Sure.
wanted to kind of do my spin on it, right? Like what can I do with that idea? And I ended up having this class of people um, on the planet who are called jar brains, but they're the elite. They're the powerful and the wealthy who
Yeah.
have the means to extend their lives by, more than double the average person by having their brain literally put into a new body. And there are two things that I really enjoyed when it came to exploring these jar brains.
Hmm.
One was the fact that they're machines, and so they're kind of janky. Like even
Yeah.
though we love to like romanticize the idea of high tech and spaceships and faster than light and cyborg bodies and all that, like the reality is technology never works the way we want
Yeah.
it to, really. And so and things get outdated. Like my iPhone is what, a few years old, and it's already like outdated, right? So I wanted to play with this idea of like, the cyberpunk trend, like the cyborg body with the human consciousness in it. But the machines are kind of creepy and messed up,
Yeah.
and they get outdated. And when you interact with them, they don't quite cross the uncanny valley, because like they're very lifelike, but they're still not quite, you know, as realistic as real humans. And so
Sure.
nobody really wants to associate with like these people. And they have their own. I mean, they're already
I-
set apart from the rest of society
yeah.
by virtue of the fact that they're super rich and disconnected from the average person. But now they're also in these creepy like machine bodies. And of course, there's like technological advancement and evolution, and there's different models of them and so on. So I wanted to play with that. And then like and then there's just the thought experiment of like, would you sign up for this? Like
For the jar
I
brain side of it?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right? Like if you had the money, and you could at age 70 be like, well, I don't need to be in this, old, slow, you body that's just deteriorating. I can just get a new one. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not going to be perfect, but like I'm going to live another 70 years. Um, would you do it? And so like I wanted that to kind of be this question always sort of in the back of the reader's mind as well, because it's like the rich and the famous have bought it. Like the people who have the money have bought in, right? Like they
Yeah.
get to live longer than everyone else. But everyone else is kind of creeped out by it. And are they do they re is it just because they can't access it? Like Isako, for example, finds the jar brains incredibly off-putting, and she's like, I would
Yeah.
never do that. I'm gonna like retire. I'm gonna walk into basically end my life before I, do that. But like, they don't have access to it, and yet it's kind of this question that I want people to sort of have in the back of their mind of like, you know, how much humanity are you willing to give up for more time?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That it's such a cool element of the book, especially like the different, like you said, the different models of it, because it gave me chills a little bit hearing you compare the different models of Jarbrains to like your iPhone getting old. Um, because yeah, like that, what a fascinating question. And like, how would you be able to influence things if you had that much more time than anyone else?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's a really cool world building element. I love that that's one that you were especially like you got into. Um, Another one I wanted to ask you about the world building is I want to shout out the surnames that people have,
Mhm.
which are all uh, based on like features or like species from old Earth.
Right.
Um, I know that so when I interviewed you about Jade Legacy, you had a really detailed timeline software that you used to keep track of everything. Do you have a crazy database of these names? Because there are a lot of them, or did you come up with them on the fly?
I came up with, well, I did have a database. I also came up with them on the fly. So I'd come up
Okay.
with them and then like put them into my list, make sure I didn't like duplicate them. And then I also was like, okay, what's sort of the logic behind them? And and yeah, like I liked the idea of the naming convention. I just love names. I
Yeah.
did that with the Green Bone Saga. I love car names and street names and restaurant names. So I love names. And in Isako, I wanted the names to have some connection to the heritage of Earth, right? And it kind of feeds back into the culture because names and
Yeah.
culture are so interconnected. Like, okay, a key element of the culture on this planet is this ongoing um, dream goal by the corporation to terraform the planet, even though it's happening
Yeah.
much more slowly than it would if they had the support of Earth. But this dream that the corporation continues to perpetuate throughout the generations is that the planet can be turned into one that's like that of Earth.
Yeah.
And so these names, the sort of the family names essentially of the people are all associated with something that is related to Earth that doesn't exist yet on this planet. You know,
Oh
whether that be
man.
lake or rain or animal names, or, you know, or so that's the story behind the naming. And also they're more fluid, right? So one of the elements of the society is that people are organized into what are called KISS, but they're called KISS
Yeah.
because they have a corporate acronym of like community trade habitations. Um, and these community trade habitations are organized to like make division of labor more efficient. So, you
Yeah.
know, not everyone has like the nuclear family, like, you know, we do now with like double working parents and you're like trying to like figure out childcare and
Yeah.
all that. And so they're organized so that like, you know, there's social support for people to be able to work for the company and they transfer kind of into these different TIF groups to some extent based on like the division they work for and their profession and they're matched, you know, and so it's kind of like the company helps you to get matched with people who are compatible. And so
Yeah.
there's definitely cultural, societal elements and the sort of inherent mythology around how people think about Earth that's tied to the naming conventions.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think of, obviously the kiths is a pretty present thing in the book. I didn't think about like the fact that these things don't even exist on this planet yet as like just another layer of like the corporation seeding the dream in.
Mhm.
Oof. So I do want to talk to you about some spoilery stuff. So I want to ask you a couple of just quick fun questions, and then we're going to pause here for people watching.
Sounds good.
We're going to come back. There will be another one of these videos where we dig into spoilers because the spoilers are too good not to talk about, and I don't want to ruin them for you today. Quick final question here in our non-spoiler section. If you lived on this planet, would you be pro terraforming or pro getting back in touch with Earth?
Oh my gosh. That's a good question. You know, I think I mean, I hate to say it because some of the worst characters in this book are the terraformists. But I would be a terraformist, I think, um, because of the essentially the philosophy that they have around, you know, you've got to kind of take destiny into your own hands and make the
Yeah.
place that you're living now, the place you want to live.
Yeah.
Um, and so that is the admirable thing about the terraformists is that they've hung on to this dream that they can make the planet better. They can make the planet have water and oxygen and grass and animals. Um, that said, there's some characters that are really pretty unlikable and very morally compromised terraformists. So I kind of feel like bad about saying that, but I
There's no wrong answer here. I mean, this
there's
is
no
your
wrong answer.
book.
There's also some really bad reunionists
There
too, to
are.
be
Yeah.
fair.
That was what I was going to say. You do a really great job of, it's not like one side is painted. They're just the good guys and the
Yeah,
bad guys. Like there are morally gray, leaning toward bad people on both sides of this fence.
yeah.
They both have dreamers, which I think is a
Hmm.
pretty cool way of doing this because, both of these things, getting back in touch with Earth or terraforming this very inhospitable alien planet, like they both take a certain amount of like insane dreaming to even
Right,
consider
right.
doing it. So
Yeah,
there's no wrong answers.
yeah, yeah. And I think I may be a little bit biased because as the author, my like headcanon is like some bad stuff went down on Earth. Like you don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to get back in touch with Earth,
Yeah,
but
that's
maybe it's
fair.
like,
One other non-spoiler question that occurred to me. So you mentioned you have another fantasy series in you. Do you think you're going to write any more in this world? Or are you going to go on to fantasy next? If you can say.
so as of I never say never,
Sure.
but I definitely intended this book to be a standalone and for it to
Yeah.
feel complete at the end of it.
And it
So
does.
I don't,
Totally
yeah,
does.
I don't see myself coming back to this one for, unless some other story that really fits the setting comes back into my
Yeah.
or comes into my mind. No, I see this one being on its own.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Fonda. We're going to pause the video here. We're going to be back. Watch the spoiler chat next time.